He's a complete pathological liar.
Let's be honest. There are outsiders coming into communities, stealing and moving jobs away, and making life harder for people living there. And they have names: Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
Complete liar. Lied about being in Tiananmen Square. Lied about being a head coach of a football team.
Because this started, and I love this story, as a young prosecutor. Kamala Harris talked about going in that courtroom for the first time.
Pathological liars, people that are habitual liars, they just lie all the time about everything.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't deploy for war. You didn't. Why are you saying you deployed at war? The weapons you used in war? No. You were in war.
I plan on waking up on November 6th with Madam President.
I want to be clear, you won't be waking up together.
No, you weren't a head coach. You were the water boy. The f*** are you talking about?
I thought some of that was weird.
He's just a liar.
Walz says Democrats hate success.
We as Democrats, we want people to pay their fair share, but why are we against people being successful like that? We can't be. Why are we against? We should talk about businesses. Not all businesses exploit their workers, and we get ourselves stuck in that.
Oh, well,
and
Governor,
I think we lose them.
Get a room. Oh, wait, they weren't in a room. Vince.
This is the guy that was rooting against Tesla stock.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the same guy.
No, it's amazing.
Something totally unexpected just exploded on live air and no one saw it coming. Joe Rogan blinked twice in disbelief. Greg Gutfeld nearly choked on his drink, and Tim Walz? He's probably still trying to reboot his system after that verbal knockout. This wasn't some calm, structured debate, it was a complete takedown. So what exactly did Walz say that lit a fire under both of them at the same time? And why is the internet going absolutely feral over it? Buckle up, because what started as politics quickly spiraled into a no-holds-barred roast session, and it's the kind you don't walk away from unscathed. Asterisk.
Oh, Tim Walz is out there talking again.
Did you say he could fight any Trump supporter?
Yeah, he says he kicked, and they're scared of him because he could fix a truck. They're threatened by his masculinity. I know how to fix a truck. That's what he said. I'm like, do you? I bet you don't.
The lady doth protest too much.
I bet you don't.
I fear.
I bet if I bring a broken truck to you and a bag of tools.
That was Kamala's VP, Tim Walz, is being accused of lying about his rank, which is called stolen valor. But in Walz's defense in Minneapolis, stealing is legal.
What happens when Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld dive into a heated conversation about lockdowns, mandates, and political gaslighting? You get a governor trying to make a faster exit than his press secretary and come up with a cover story. It starts. Off subtle Rogan lifts an eyebrow. Gutfeld leans in and suddenly, somewhere in Minnesota, Tim Walz's entire team is frantically searching how to vanish from the internet. This wasn't your typical political critique, it turned into a two-man comedy horror performance. And at the center of it all stood a governor who somehow transformed the concept of leadership into a gold medal-worthy act of Olympic-level flip-flopping.
Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank in service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there," and then ran away.
You haven't seen that? No. The video of him taking down the Minnesota flag and he replaced it with the new flag that looks a lot like the Somali flag. Minnesota has a huge population of Somalis in it.
Wait a minute.
So he gets the flag, picks it up, moves it out of the way, and replaces it. Look at this.
There, that's better.
Why is that better?
I don't know.
Let's start with the man of the hour himself, Tim Walz, a governor whose resume is just as chaotic as his pandemic game plan. Once a soft-spoken high school teacher with big political dreams, he strolled into office armed with a smile, a dose of Midwestern charm, and a back pocket full of so-called data-driven decisions. But it didn't take long for that spreadsheet to go up in flames. 1 minute he was pledging to follow the science, and the next, he was improvising public policy like a jazz musician wired on triple espressos and 0 hours of sleep. Asterisk.
Kennedy, I like it. Like, what a better way to show their opposition to successful people than making him VP? He's the best example of failing up.
Yeah, and he didn't even do good at failing up because he helped tank the ticket and she lost the race because it showed, like, Tim Walz is the best example for why Kamala Harris has the worst political instincts in the Democrat Party, which is, I mean, it's a low bar, but...
Before everything spiraled into chaos, he had the vibe of that friendly, approachable neighbor, the one who smiles and waves while dramatically overwatering his lawn. But the moment COVID hit, it was as if he gathered every rule, threw them into a blender and slammed the puree button. Gyms locked down, churches closed, neighborhood cafes shut tight, but mass protests, oh, those were suddenly completely acceptable. Because apparently viruses know when to pause for a political message and conveniently take a smoke break when the narrative fits.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all. Well, welcome to the Capitol. It's great that you're all... Sir, you're welcome to come. Let me finish. Let me finish and vote.
Hey, sir, he doesn't have fucking votes, sir. Shut your mouth.
This was a man who wielded emergency powers like Thanos armed with a PowerPoint presentation. Every time someone dared to ask when it would all end, he reached for yet another executive order like he was collecting Infinity Stones. And don't even get started on the mask mandates. That saga deserved its own trilogy. First it was masks on, then off, then optional, then required indoors unless you were standing still, humming softly, and possibly wearing Crocs. These weren't public health guidelines. They were riddles wrapped in contradictions. That's when Joe Rogan entered the picture, watching from a distance like a man who just opened his fridge and smelled something off. Rogan's never been a fan of government overreach or politicians drunk on power who act like they're the only ones with access to Google. Why were playgrounds roped off with yellow tape while liquor stores remained untouched like sacred temples? Watching Rogan dissect the logic was like watching a bear delicately peel a banana only to crush it with 1 pause seconds later.
He was 100% right with Tim Walz.
I know I'm doing something right when the Fox News crowd is all pitching at me like crazy. Like, I'm loving it.
That guy was almost the vice president of the United States.
Elon Musk was crying last week. Tim is being mean to me, Baze, you know, like, yeah.
I'm sure you've seen that thing where it shows Obama saying, I need a vice president that's dumber than me.
He may or may not have cognitive decline problems at his age, but at her age, she's just dumb.
Yeah, Biden and I Biden think I was saying that I need a vice president dumber than me.
And just when things couldn't get any worse for Walz, in walks Greg Gutfeld, sipping a cocktail made of pure sarcasm and Red Bull. While Rogan calmly pointed out the absurdities, Gutfeld took those same contradictions, dressed them up in full clown makeup, and shoved them straight into the spotlight. His mockery was so precise, so cutting, you could almost hear political consultants whimpering behind the scenes. Gutfeld didn't frame Walz as a leader navigating a crisis. He painted him, the guy who sees a fire alarm going off and tries to put out the flames using a handful of confetti. He tore into the absurd logic behind the restrictions, like when indoor dining was banned, but outdoor dining was allowed as long as it happened inside plastic igloos with windows. The rules shifted more often than his haircut. Businesses were told to just hang in there, only to be blindsided by yet another round of confusing mandates dropped during a midweek press conference that sounded like it was thrown together by a baffled intern consulting a magic 8-ball asterisk.
Active Politico writes this piece on the body language from the debate, claiming that it speaks volumes. Yeah, it says that Walz lost, but one of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eye.
Rogan couldn't hold back. He called out how the working class took the biggest hit. Barbers, mechanics, personal trainers, anyone who didn't live their lives inside a Zoom cube felt the brunt of it all. Meanwhile, Walz and his inner circle cruised along untouched, unbothered, and perfectly lit on every virtual call. And don't even bring up the remote learning mess. Rogan practically erupted, pointing out how kids were tossed into a digital black hole while the children of politicians glided through private education as if nothing had changed. Gutfeld, of course, flipped it into full-blown satire. He joked that Walz probably had a secret wheel of fortune backstage labeled mandate, mask up, blame the feds, and pretend everything's fine. And each morning, he'd give it a spin while casually sipping kombucha. This wasn't some outlandish conspiracy, it was Walz's own greatest hits, playing on repeat and sounding more unhinged with every spin. And just in case anyone thought this was only about COVID, Gutfeld reminded the audience of what followed businesses in flames, cities unraveling, and the chaos after George Floyd's death that left scars still healing.
Have you ever seen that video?
No.
This is what people love about Donald Trump. The fact that he would say this.
But unfortunately, Governor Walz isn't here himself, but don't worry, he'll say that he was. He's going to say it. I used to think the Democrats were crazy for saying that men have period, but then I met Tim Walz.
It's hard to even bring him up. He has a resting snitch face. You know? I mean, he forfeited his man card during COVID and the riots. And you're right. And also, at that diner, of course, he left early.
And as for leadership, Walz seemed to spend more time figuring out who was in charge than actually stepping up himself. It felt like watching a game of hide-and-seek with accountability. Rogan came armed with hard numbers crime rates, property, damage, economic collapse, while Gutfeld brought the one-liners. Together, they transformed a political failure into a roast you couldn't tear your eyes away from. Gutfeld painted the whole thing as government cosplay, with Walz dressed up like a leader, but delivering like a substitute teacher who misplaced the lesson plan and the harsh reality. The people were the ones who paid the price instead of rising. To the moment, Walz became the walking cautionary tale Rogan mocks and Gutfeld turns into late-night satire. Because when your pandemic policies end up as punchlines for a UFC commentator and a whiteboard-loving libertarian, it might be time to polish your resume more. At the very least, start reading your own executive orders before signing them.
Tim's odd greeting, the man of the hour. Tim Walz brings us our second video of the day, and he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it. I want to see this in slow motion. You'll see Walz extends his hand to his wife. She grabs it, they shake, he pulls her close, and then goes in for that non-friction hug, all the while still shaking her hand. I wish there was a word to describe that. Oh yeah, weird.
And that's when Joe Rogan officially stepped into the ring, not wearing a suit, not clutching a script, but armed with a pair of headphones and enough frustration to power the entire Texas grid. You could almost hear the side building before. He even spoke, because while Tim Walz was out there crafting a brand new flavor of indecision, Rogan had a front row seat to the entire circus playing out in real time, and his BS detector was going off like a metal scanner at a scrapyard. Rogan didn't just call out the hypocrisy, he blasted it through a megaphone. While small, family-run businesses were slapped with fines, boarded up, or drowned in red tape, the corporate giants strolled through lockdowns like honored guests at a VIP pandemic gala. This wasn't about science, it wasn't about public health, it was a rigged game where the rules shifted depending on who had the money, the connections, and the lobbyists to bend them.
Getting scary close to people justifying totalitarian measures.
I think we need to push back on this.
Tim Walz in the campaign trail was literally saying free speech doesn't include hate speech and misinformation.
There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Hey man, you, because everything that we called misinformation just a few years ago, it's on the front page of the New York Times now.
On his podcast, Greg broke it all down with the kind of plain-spoken common sense that made listeners pause and say, wait a minute, yeah, what the hell was that all about? In one episode, he dissected performative politics like a roast chicken, tearing it apart piece by piece. What looked polished on camera almost never added up in real life. Walz's policies became the textbook example like, when Minnesota introduced capacity limits that made less and less sense the more you thought about them. You were allowed to sit in a restaurant, but not at the bar. You could eat indoors, but only until 10 p.m., because that's apparently when the virus clocked in for the night shift. Rogan, meanwhile, took the class divide and turned it into a full-on mic drop. There was no subtlety, just raw, unfiltered outrage. He mocked the absurdity like a comedian trapped inside a soap opera. 1 minute it's safe, then suddenly no, it's dangerous, then we're following the science actually, scratch that. We just changed it 5 minutes ago after panicking over a viral tweet. You didn't know whether to laugh or scream it thanks to Joe. You ended up doing both.
It's amazing how they operate one way when they're running, and then when they lose and get humiliated, all of a sudden they have these solutions, and they're all the things we're telling you to do. Like, why are you trying to trash one of the most successful companies in the world, you moron?
And they never did that because they all used to love Trump when Trump was giving them money.
Yeah.
Then Trump became like Rodney Dangerfield in Caddyshack.
Yeah.
He crashed their party, showed up at the White House, and he was just like, hey, you know what? We should put like a casino over there, an MMA ring over there.
And just as Walz's approval rating began its slow slide into the abyss, Greg Gutfeld dropped in like a smirking paratrooper with a flamethrower in hand. If Rogan was the voice of the everyday person asking hard questions, Gutfeld played the sharp-tongued uncle at Thanksgiving, the one who couldn't care less what you think and brings color-coded charts just to ruin dessert. He wasn't there to debate. He came to dismantle through pure, unfiltered sarcasm. His jokes didn't need setups or punchlines because Walz asterisk was asterisk the punchline. He zeroed in on the governor's addiction to emergency powers, roasting him like a guy obsessively stuck choosing fonts in a Word document. He's not saving lives, Gutfeld scoffed. He's just weirdly committed to Times New Roman. This wasn't leadership, it was theater. And not the good kind, it was the kind of performance you walk out of halfway through muttering, angrily and demanding your money back. Gutfeld didn't just expose the flaws, he rewrote the entire script, layering in so much satire that Walz's press team probably launched into full-blown crisis mode, asterisk.
They've released analyses of election data out of Clark County, Nevada that show some pretty convincing evidence of election tampering. So what can we do to make sure, A, that the midterms actually happen, and B, that they're free of fraud?
Yeah, this one's a core. We saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems?
Then came the broader critique. Walz wasn't leading. He was merely asterisk playing asterisk a leader. Just another blue state bureaucrat playing dress up while real Americans were bleeding financially. One cautious comment from Fauci and Walz slammed the stage shut like he'd just gotten a direct text from the apocalypse. There was no effort to balance public health with economic survival, just a default mode of sheer panic. And then came Gutfeld's knockout punch. Tim Walz somehow managed to lose the trust of both political sides. Liberals see him as spineless. Conservatives think he's lost his mind. That's not called balance, that's just being terrible at your job. Game over. Public trust obliterated. Then the side-by-side comparisons started rolling in press briefings next to Rogan and Gutfeld's live reactions. Walz stammering his way through yet another attempt to redefine essential, while Rogan squinted like he was watching someone try to explain cryptocurrency to a toaster. Gutfeld jumped in with his signature flair. It all makes sense if you've been sniffing hand sanitizer and licking sidewalk chalk. The internet didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or just send Walz a well-worn copy of asterisk leadership for dummies, asterisk.
Whose expertise does he rely upon for his Midwestern takes? Here's Minnesota State Rep Leigh Finke, who wants to train more children's doctors on sex change surgery and puberty blockers. He sponsored the Trans Refuge Bill, which Walz signed, which makes Minnesota a sanctuary state for such butchery.
If you promise trans refuge, then we need to increase the number of people who are offering gender-affirming care. So we have some money, hopefully we can pass, to help entice people to move from those states who also practice gender-affirming care. We want to do internship programs and fellowship programs with Children's Minnesota and other places where people can learn gender-affirming care.
Wow. It's now available for babysitting.
The takedown wasn't explosive, it was surgical. Not just a roast, but a full-blown dissection, every contradiction exposed. Every absurd regulation flipped into a punchline. And what remained was a governor standing alone in the wreckage of his own choices, trying to figure out why the applause had suddenly stopped. But this wasn't just about Tim Walz, this was about something deeper: the slow, painful erosion of public trust. What happens when leaders pretend to lead, then pin the blame on the very people they failed to listen to? Minnesota's economy took a brutal hit. Small businesses shut their doors for good. The polls began to slip. Approval ratings dropped like a canoe taking on water. Even the loyal voters started to wonder, wait, this is what we voted for. While other governors stepped up and owned their mistakes, Walz stayed stuck in denial, becoming patient zero. For performative politics, and Joe Rogan, never one for sugarcoating, hammered the final nail in the political coffin. We're not saying don't lead. We're saying stop pretending you are. And just like that, a governor's credibility got body slammed not by a raging mob, but by a podcast host and a late-night Fox comedian. No anger, no venom. Just cold, clear facts and sharp-edged humor served with the kind of clarity that only shows up when the fog of fake leadership finally lifts.